Perfect. So yes, let me introduce first of all Ben.
Hi, so my name's Ben Booker. I'm General Manager at Ashdown Park Hotel. We are a 106-bedroom country house hotel based in East Sussex. The nearest point of reference is probably Gatwick. We're about 15 minutes from Gatwick. So I've been here nearly 15 years, been in the hotel trade since I was 16, so that's a long time ago, 33 years ago. And I think this last year has been probably one of the most challenging we've had, as any other industry has had, and we're just trying our best now to navigate our way through it and out of it.
Thanks very much, Ben, and we'll hear lots more from Ben later. Milly.
Hi, I'm Milly Sutton. I am the founder of My London Event. I was working at a big American law firm for 15 years, so a lot of my contacts will know me through that. And since then, and having my children, I'm now an events consultant, and I work with small to medium-sized companies that don't always need an events person full-time. So delighted to see you all.
Thanks, Milly. And then last but definitely not least, Colette.
Hi everyone, my name's Colette Norfolk. I'm a director at Leighton Taylor Consulting. We are a niche professional services recruitment agency specialising in recruiting marketing, business development, client relationship and events professionals across the sector, everything from assistant up to director. I've been a director here for about 10 years now, and previous to that I was at another larger agency for at least 10 years. So yeah, about 20 years recruitment experience in this sector.
Fantastic, thanks Colette. So yes, a real diverse panel there, and hopefully lots of different views on the topic today, which is the future of events. So I'm going to share my screen with you now because I have a few slides. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm sure everyone is well used to these events on Zoom by now, but feel free to put yourself into gallery view or speaker view if you just want to see the speaker. If anyone has any questions as we go through, we will have time for a Q&A at the end. But if anyone has any questions and they want to pop them in the chat, Milly will be monitoring them as we go through, and we'll be picking them up and asking them of our panelists. So feel free to put any questions in the chat. But let me share the slides with you now. And what I want to do is I want to share the results of a survey that we conducted to help shape the conversation today. And what we did was we asked a number of professional services firms, and we had a fantastic response. And I've just put up here an idea of the sorts of people who responded, or the sorts of firms that responded. So you can see there lots with offices in London, around a third with international offices as well, 80% with more than 100 employees. So just to give you the idea of the sorts of firms that answered that survey. And I should say, before I forget, that Ben has donated very kindly afternoon tea for 2. And everyone who answered the survey and everyone who's online today gets the opportunity, hopefully, to win that at the end. So we will do the draw at the end. So what we did was we asked people what the picture was pre-COVID. And as you would expect, you know, there was a mix of frequency, but the sorts of things that you would expect to see on an events calendar were there. So conferences, corporate hospitality, in-house events. But what was really interesting, and the pink columns here are things that people said that they never did pre-COVID. So you can already see there where this is going. And 61%, which I found astonishing, said that they had never done webinars pre-COVID. I suspect over COVID, that figure has gone down dramatically. 71% said that they had never done a hybrid event before. And actually that figure surprised me because I thought it would be even higher, to the 100%. So that's really interesting. And I want you to keep those figures in mind, because the next thing we asked people was what will happen when face-to-face events are allowed, and how will that change your events calendar? And this is what we found. And again, some really interesting results coming out here, offering lots of reflections that I'm going to pick up with the panel. So if we look at these first few columns, which are the things that, you know, everyone was doing to a certain extent, you can see that people are thinking about doing these a lot less going forward. So conferences, corporate hospitality, in-house events. What was also interesting was that lunches and dinners, and if we remember that everyone was doing lunches and dinners, and some people were doing lunches and dinners every week, so I'm not sure how much these can be increased by, but people saying that they want to increase these even further. And interestingly, if we think about the pink in the last two columns on the previous slide, this is flipped. So a huge increase in people saying that they're going to be doing webinars more than they did pre-COVID going forward, and a lot of people saying that they're going to be doing hybrid events going forward. So some interesting things there. And what I want to do now is offer some of my reflections, and I'm going to pick up these reflections with our panelists in a moment. So reflections, what I've got from the data, and the thing with statistics is everyone gets something slightly different from it, is that there seems to be a split between events which are there for networking and events which are there for content. And those networking events, the trend seems to be that they're going to be held in smaller sizes, so the lunches and the dinners, perhaps more personal. Parties, residentials, pretty much the same. These tend to be targeted towards clients. So what's interesting here is that perhaps there's more comfort with staff. Perhaps there's more of a need with staff. One of the things that Milly and I were reflecting on when we looked at some of these numbers was, come September, many teams will have been some 18 months probably without being in the same room together. So there's perhaps a real driver to try and get some of these team staff events back up and running. Content, as I said, seems to have moved to a digital platform or part digital. So events in the office tended to be things where we would be sharing content with our clients. That seems to be going down in favour of webinars, which everyone is presumably much more comfortable with, or part digital, so hybrid. And hybrid events are going to be something that we're going to talk a lot about, particularly when I turn to Milly, because I think that, we saw that people haven't done hybrid events. So, how are they going to work? Are they going to work? People have switched to webinars very quickly, but obviously hybrid is a completely different beast. So the big question, when? Now, obviously, I asked people to answer this survey before Boris's announcement yesterday. But interestingly, what we were hearing, and this is something I'm going to be picking up also with Colette a little bit later on, 50% are planning events from September. And as I said, that's regardless of what was happening with Boris anyway. Some others thinking about January, a very small percentage, July this year. It'd be interesting to see if any of those people online are now perhaps revising their view in light of what Boris has said. But interestingly, only just over a quarter of people said that they haven't started planning them yet. So I think there is a real desire to try and get back to face, and clearly people are starting to think about how they can do that. So before I turn to Ben and the panel, I want to leave with, for me, what is the biggest question of them all, and that is what about our clients? I've put on the screen here two quotes from an article that came out 7th of June, is that this week, last week, anyway, very recently, talking about the sorts of events that are starting to get back online: annual general meetings, no refreshments, no mingling. A accountancy firm in the city who had already started back with some dinners, but COVID testing before, seats 2 meters apart, no waiter service, pour your own wine. Perhaps that one's a positive, but a very different feel for these events. And thinking about our clients and thinking about the corporates, and we'll be talking to Ben about this. The BBC recently reported that of the 50 UK biggest employers that they've gone out and spoken to, all of them have said that they don't plan to bring back staff full time. NatWest have said just 13% to work from the office after the pandemic in that Bloomberg article. A people management article has suggested that more than half have said that their staff are worried about contracting coronavirus in the office. 2 in 5 have said that employees are worried about contracting it on the public transport getting into the office, let alone getting into events. So for me, and it'll be interesting to see, I've got it on a different screen, so I'm dying to see what people are saying. If you haven't gone into the Menti link, go and have a look. I will be sharing the results with you soon, but it'll be interesting to see who is actually speaking to their clients about their plans, because obviously there will be a difference in terms of clients who feel happy to turn up to events. There'll be clients who are perhaps still very nervous. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Ben. Oops, no, hang on, sorry, bear with me. The joys of virtual events. I've got so many tabs open. So Ben, thank you again. Thank you for joining us in what has been, an interesting week so far, and I suspect one that's causing you lots of headaches. I wanted to start off by kind of asking you clearly, everyone has been affected by the pandemic. I think your sector has been affected perhaps more than most. And I just wanted to find out from you your reflections on, now things are starting to open up. What are you seeing?
So a real mix, to be honest, still. We all opened up with the vision that our leisure business would be busy, but it's busier beyond our expectations. But beyond that, we are taking quite a lot of inquiries and business for events. And events to us is a broad spectrum. It's not just weddings and lunches, but it's meetings, conferences, and other gatherings. And the level we've had of that is far exceeding what we thought. So we've already had 2 or 3 meetings, and these for all sectors, medical, insurance, but we're finding they are senior level. So it's normally the board or the exec team who haven't been together in the same room for year, 18 months. And the Zoom meetings are all well and good, but they're not the same as being in the same room. So we have seen a return of those. We've got another next week, and we've taken today probably about 7 inquiries for the same thing over the next few months. Actually, I thought yesterday's announcement was being waited for by some industries to see what they could do, and actually they feel they can carry on in June and July, just at a smaller level. Now they know, they're looking to inquire and make those bookings. Okay, but we're also taking bookings for larger events, 100 plus people, for November, December and January onwards.
Okay, so very much reflecting some of the results that we've seen as well in our survey there. Now, in terms of confidence, I want to come to that. And you've mentioned kind of the split between corporate and private bookings. You've mentioned that corporates are starting to come back. Have you seen any specific sectors that are kind of leading the way in terms of bookings?
No, not really, not for us. But that would go hand in hand with the level of business we've always had. It's always been a broad spectrum. So we've never really focused on one area, whether it be medical, automotive, law firms. We've done business here for everybody. And that's a lot to do with our location and the fact we have so much space. So even before COVID, people like to have the space. We've got 186 acres. The rooms are very big and they're airy. So I think all of that makes a difference. So not one sector really has been our target market.
Okay, fantastic.
And they're all now looking, all of them are inquiring. It's not just one area. It's surprising, to be honest.
And that's interesting, again, going back to what we were thinking about in terms of clients and whether there is an appetite for clients to start to come to some of these events that the professional services firms are putting on. I should say, again, if anyone has any questions for Ben, we will have time at the end, but time always goes so quickly on these things. So if anyone has any thoughts or questions for Ben as we're going through, do feel free to put those in the chat and we can pick those up. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Ben, was obviously last year when COVID hit, it came, as a shock to everyone, I think, regardless of, if we were watching the news in January and seeing things happening in China. I don't think we quite appreciated how hard it was going to hit us here in the UK. Certainly I didn't. And I myself had bookings for events that had to get cancelled because of the pandemic. I think it kind of took the sector by surprise. Now, in terms of going forward, obviously COVID is a risk. It continues to be a risk. And one of the things that people online might be wondering is, what are hotels and other venues now going to be doing to protect themselves? And is that something perhaps that might get in my way of booking? So what sorts of things are you doing now to make sure that you're, protected, but also that people who are confident to start booking again, that the balance is struck?
Yeah, so I mean, I know for a fact that hotels across the country are all doing it quite differently, actually. As far as we're concerned, we're having to be much more flexible with regards to our terms, obviously. We are fully aware that if you book an event for 60 people in October, but it can't go ahead because of further government restrictions, we're fully accepting that we either have to refund deposits or preferably move it on to a further date later in the year. There's no point in trying to be too sticking to the current rules or our old terms and conditions, because the world's moved on and we have to accept that. But on the same token, we are also very vigilant in-house of making sure that anything we do is COVID secure. So we have increased cleaning regimes, we do the social distancing, we make sure that everything we do complies with the current legislation, which is pretty tricky at times, and I have to say, not very cost effective for us, but that's just the way it is. It's just what you have to do. And that's gone down very well, I have to say. And so I think the flexibility with our terms, which we have to do, it's the right thing to do, has proved positive.
And I think we were mentioning before some of the participants joined us today about the BBC yesterday, and there was a guy on, and he had a line which I thought was lovely, which was, pubs aren't about the liquid, they're about the experience. And I thought that was just a really nice kind of summary of why people go to events, why people go to venues. Picking up on some of that, the networking side of things, those comments I said earlier in terms of COVID tests before you go in. Clearly now these measures are going to be in place for a while longer. You've said that there's going to be testing. What are you doing to try and make sure that your guests still have that experience despite all of the rules that you have to follow?
Well, we've just made sure that everybody here, staff-wise, are trained in the COVID-safe protocols. You have to do the test and trace when you come in. We don't ask for test results. That's not up to us to do that. So we're not trying to be governmental about it. We still have things to follow, and we've got procedures to follow which are still in place from the government. But that aside, we still offer a personal service. We do table service. We will bring food and drink to your table. Buffets are not allowed, and that's not a problem. So as far as the service aspect goes, it's not really very different. There are bits that we can't do. We used to give a biscuit with a coffee. It was a homemade biscuit. Well, now it's a packaged biscuit because it's going through less hands. So there's a few tweaks, but the reality is our offering and our service and our rooms are exactly the same.
Okay, I can see, thank you to those in the audience that are starting to share some questions. So Miriam has asked, similar theme, speakers, terms and conditions have client taking all the risk, requiring full payment in all cases apart from full lockdown. Is the industry getting more flexible, worth trying to negotiate? So that is more about speakers. So Ben, I don't know whether you can answer that, or Milly, maybe you can jump in to answer that one. Have anyone seen any different terms and conditions there in terms of speakers?
Well, not from my side yet. Milly, maybe. And as I said, terms and conditions, it seems to be very varied across different hotels and speakers and other third parties. Some are very strong on it and are insistent on full 100% cancellation policies. Others are not. They accept the situation is different now.
And I imagine that there's more flexibility than perhaps there was previously in terms of negotiating some of those terms and conditions.
Well, I mean, certainly from my point of view, there is. I mean, I can't answer for everybody, but certainly with us, yes, we are. We're much more flexible and have to, and it's certainly the right thing to do, isn't it? I think so.
Another question here, what do you suggest for sectors that focus on networking lunches as a business development activity in place of buffets, etc.? So any thoughts there?
Yeah, we've had, we've not done one yet. We have one coming up in July, and it's broadly similar, albeit the fact that people have to be seated. And I do understand that the networking thing is very much standing up, moving about, chatting. But we have one coming up for about 30 people, but they are seated on tables of 6. That's the maximum we are permitted to do. And we will do a plated lunch. It's a plated cold lunch, if you like. It's a bit more than salads, but it's not a warm lunch. And that's what the company's requested. We're happy to do it. Let's see how it works. I think it'll be very positive.
Fantastic. And I guess, you know, the flexibility of being able to do it in a venue like yours is that you can also have that private room, maybe, you know, rather than perhaps doing it in a restaurant or you know, where actually, you know, the numbers and the distancing might kind of get in the way of that.
Well, this particular one, they did request that we do it outside, so we are doing it down by the summer house. So again, I think that is, for us here, that's just an advantage we have over others. But other hotels have outside areas and can do outside events, and yeah, I think it'll work very well.
Okay. One last question, then I'm going to go to Milly. Please keep the questions coming. And if anyone's got any thoughts or views, you know, we've got so many people online today. It'd be fantastic to get some other voices as well in the room. If you've got ideas or thoughts, please do share those. So my last question, and I think you've almost answered it as we've been going through, but where can you see the most optimism? Is it in the private sector, the staycations that everyone's now having to do, or is it the corporates, or is it pretty much half? You know,
well, without doubt, the highest percentage of business is currently the staycation market, and I don't really see that changing in the immediate 2 or 3 months. That will be strong throughout July, August, and September. It's very hard to say beyond September, to be honest with you. I suspect we will get more meeting inquiries for October onwards, some for September still. Christmas, well, December as a whole, it depends very much on regulations, but if regulations do go back to or dropped, let's say, from July, I expect December will be very busy for the hospitality industry, full stop, because obviously last December didn't happen, so people feel they've missed out on a Christmas. So I suspect that'll be very busy. Now, we are already fully booked on our prime evenings for December, so we have no Friday or Saturday nights left for anything in here, but it will go to the extent where I think midweek dates become in demand for office parties, and then I think the whole Christmas experience of staying over Christmas will be popular this year as well. And then I think there'll be a larger increase of more conference style business come January onwards. We already have 2 booked, confirmed, both in January, but I think that January, February, March period will be conference time, and you're going to have the businesses that have not seen each other for, as you said, a year, 18 months, more people working from home, but they're going to have to get their teams together at some point, at some stage, and I think that's when they're going to do it.
Thanks. I'm going to leave, Leanne, thank you for your question. I'm going to leave it until we hear a little bit from Milly, because we are going to talk to Milly about hybrid events. And actually it'd be interesting then, Ben, because one of the things, you know, one of the big things with hybrid events is the technology that you need, and you know, very different to the technology that you might need for you know, the webinars that we've got used to over the past 12 months. So actually, you know, from my perspective, I can see that they might be a big draw in terms of hotels and technology. So we'll come back to you on that question, but thanks for that question. And questions still coming through, or booster jabs and all sorts of things. So do keep those questions coming, and when we can, I'll bring them in. But for now, Ben, thank you ever so much, and we'll be hearing from you again shortly. Milly, I'm just going to start by just asking you a broad question about your reflections so far. And whilst you do that, I'm going to open up a different screen, and I'm going to find what people have been sharing on Menti, so that we can share that with everyone and see what people are thinking. So Milly.
Hi there, thanks, Claire. I mean, I think what I'm going to say is probably not going to be a surprise to anyone, but you know, certainly it's been the most of a craziest year for everyone here in the room. And I think what I'm really noticing now is there's, you know, the huge push at the moment is for everyone to see their loved ones, their friends, their families, you know, those catch-ups, those birthday parties and things like that with you know, the people they've really missed. So that's obviously the focus at the moment. I think on a corporate side of things, there's a little bit of activity on the corporate side, but the main thing I'm hearing is just trying to get the staff back into the office in a way that they feel safe, secure, welcomed. You know, lots of people obviously haven't been in the office for so long. I was speaking to one of the partners yesterday. He bought himself a new suit the week before lockdown. It's still hanging in his office with the tags on. He's never worn it. He doesn't even know if it's still going to fit. So, you know, I think people are just psyching themselves up to do that. And as you said, Claire, it's, you know, it's the psychology of getting on the tube, of getting on the train, you know, how am I actually going to get into work, which was just a thing we took for granted before now. So, you know, people are just kind of going through that process, really asking around who's done it, who hasn't. And I think sometimes it depends a bit where you live, you know, what is that commute like? What's that journey like? People are having different reflections. I know most of us on the call today work, you know, in the city, but obviously there are a lot of people as well that are regional, and so they're going to have a different commute. They're going to be driving, you know, and so the roads are getting busier. That, you know, that journey time into the office is busier. So that, and, you know, so it's still very much a focus on the staff, I think, you know, in trying to get together with the staff, you know, in the next kind of couple of months if they can, just in case rules change again come September, October. So that's very much what I'm seeing at the moment. Definitely the smaller groups, and, you know, much more of a personal touch rather than just going full on back into full client events.
Thanks, Milly. I've just pulled up the results of the question that I asked everyone, which is, and clearly COVID could cover this off, but what are the biggest challenges you face getting back to face-to-face? Uncertainty, and actually interesting, Ben, your reflections around actually Boris's announcement, whilst perhaps not what everyone wanted to hear, at least it was a something, and has given some certainty, and people kind of responding to that kind of increased certainty. Technology, functional event space, picking up on that question around, you know, what do we need for hybrid events, and how are you responding? Attendee concerns, something we've discussed. You know, will people travel? Hybrid events, hybrid, will people feel safe? Venue flexibility. So lots of the things we've already been discussing, and we're going to pause on that idea of hybrid events, because I think that seems to be the biggest shift in terms of, you know, certainly what we're asking. And I think it's something that people haven't done before. And actually, as I said, I was surprised that, you know, only 70% said that they hadn't. I'm just going to show the next slide too, because I mentioned it when I was talking, and that's how many people have gone out and asked their clients about plans. And the vast majority there saying no, they haven't gone and spoken to clients about their plans. And I think that for me is, you know, it's critical. And particularly, you know, we're talking perhaps about smaller events initially. You know, some people might feel very happy about getting back into the office. Some people might be very happy to meet for a dinner or a lunch. You know, other people might have been shielding over the past, you know, 12 months, however long, and feel a lot more nervous about that. So for me on clients, you know, absolutely key that we speak to our clients before we plan something that, you know, they might not feel comfortable with. But I'm going to talk now about hybrid events, and Milly, I'd just be really interested to hear your thoughts about, you know, some of the challenges, specific challenges that firms might have around hybrid events, and some thoughts about how they might get around some of those challenges.
Yeah, well, I think if we had said to people 12 months ago, what is a hybrid event? I think everyone would have just said, oh, just doing this, going on Zoom and doing, you know, a live kind of panel discussion with different people in different rooms. And the bottom line is that everyone knows that Zoom has its restrictions, and for things like this, it's great. You know, you can't fault it, but it's for a finite amount of time, a finite number of people, and a finite level of engagement, really. And people have realised, you know, coming back to one of your earlier quotes, Claire, it's about that engagement, and it's about the interaction. And I think that's what people have realized, that, you know, everyone's got Zoom fatigue. Everyone wants that level of engagement. So, you know, there's a few different ways of looking at hybrid events, and there's different platforms that we can use. So, you know, earlier this year, I worked with PSNG and IDEO Virtual. And so thanks to the teams that are on today that are joining us from those organizations. And we did a really cool event with a full online platform, and everyone was an avatar. So the great thing about this is that people could turn up as their true self. They turned their microphones on, and when you've got a distinctive voice like I have, you could still navigate with people. You could walk around the space. You felt like you were in a campus, and it gave you that feeling of lightheartedness and fun and engagement, and you're walking around and doing things. And I think that's just so important, because the other hybrid types of events that I have seen, you know, is a big souped up kind of Zoom option, that it would be a panel, and whether they're all in different rooms or whether they're in a venue together and they're still projecting to the audience. Now, that is great for content events, and a lot of lawyers love it, and a lot of professional services use this with their clients to show the scope of knowledge and everything like that. But you know what happened, what everyone gets out of these events is the networking, and it's the interaction. And I think that's one of the key pitfalls of hybrid, is engaging and interacting and networking and keeping people online to facilitate that. And I think that's one of the real challenges. And, you know, being really honest, you know, I've worked with a lot of lawyers and a lot of times, and some of these people are so technically brilliant, but socializing is not something that they particularly enjoy or they find it easy. So by them actually kind of sitting behind this avatar persona with no lockdown weighted on and no gray, you know, because we haven't been to the hairdressers and stuff, they come into themselves and they actually become more animated because they're almost putting their work mask back on. So there's some really cool things out there, and, you know, but it does require that embracement and getting people involved, because people are generally a bit scared about what they don't know. You know, so in the traditional sense, you know, a lawyer would ask the associate to write the slides, they would rock up and they would present, and they would put their best self on and they'd do that presenting. But it's not that easy anymore. It's you can't just rock up. You've got to be organized.
We mentioned technology, and I think one of the things that's going to really kind of be a struggle for hybrid is this technology part. And someone has asked in the chat, Leanne, thank you, you know, are businesses investing to make their offices ready for hybrid events? So I've just typed in a poll question because we've got a great sample size here. So why didn't we, let me launch the poll now. So for those of you online, you know, are people investing in making their offices ready, or are you looking, you know, yes. Yeah, so there we are, there's the answer. Also, you can't see what I'm seeing. I always do this when I do a poll, and it's very interesting. So here we are, here's the results of that. 77% saying yes, they are investing in making their offices ready. And actually really interesting, you know, not only hybrid events, but even hybrid meetings. I read a really interesting article yesterday in Harvard Business Review about, you know, it's no longer going to cut it to have the spider phone in the middle and hope that those people that aren't in the office are going to be able to get heard and you know, interact on the spider phone. It's going to require all sorts of things like, you know, screens to make sure that people who aren't in the room are appearing life size, you know, all sorts of things. And that's just for, you know, just for a hybrid meeting. Ben, I might bring you in now in terms of that. You know, are you up to, you know, hybrid events weren't really a thing pre-COVID. Is that something that you've been thinking of? Do you have the technology to be able to run those?
Yeah, we do. But not to the level of some of the expertise that you can get. I mean, we have interactive is the wrong word. We have screens in 3 or 4 of our rooms that you can wirelessly project to. So you could have, if it's this meeting, for instance, could be on a big screen. we don't have any more than that, but purely because if we did, whatever we buy will be out of date in 6 months' time. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So we've just really decided some years ago that it's best just to get AV companies in as and when you need to set these things up correctly, because I could go and spend 50,000 tomorrow and it'll be all singing or dancing, but I know within 12 months it'll be obsolete. Well, not obsolete, but there'll be something much flashier than that. And it's just unrealistic to keep updating it every year. So yes, we're aware of it. We have people that can do it, and we have some nice functionality in-house, but certainly not to the level that you can get from an AV company now.
And that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because I think as companies start to think about what technology they need, I mean, even if you think over the last year, and you mentioned there kind of the virtual conference with avatars, you know, that really, you know, was something that no one would have even thought of doing, you know, a year prior. Now I know that I don't know your name, but I know Milly will know who's the avatar man.
David.
I know it's a man, so I'm not being sexist.
David,
do you want to come in here? Because I know Milly was saying you're even doing things in terms of virtual offices and all sorts of things. So did you want to kind of jump in here on the hybrid and the tech side?
Absolutely. I mean, virtual real estate, as we call it, is really changing, and you should be comparing it to real estate, physical real estate as well. And really, it's about getting your portfolio correct. So working out what you need to have virtually and what you need to have physically, because the difference is now, as we've been talking, is that no one's going back to the office 100% of the time, or very few people want to. So how do you engage? How do you get that water cooler chat, that feeling of togetherness? And what we've got a platform that allows everyone to do that. So it doesn't matter if you're in the office or out the office, you still feel part of the team. It's very hard to explain when you're not actually showing someone what the product is. When you talk about avatars, people either think I'm mad, or that I am just sitting playing with my children, playing Roblox and Minecraft all day. But it's a little bit more than that. What's interesting is when Ben talks about hybrid events, I mean, with our platform, Ben, you talk about having 100 people. I think you said sort of larger events, 100 people. I mean, we could open it up for thousands.
Yeah.
And that's the really interesting thing. You could have your event and then you could be streaming it in a different way, because this is great for an hour. But if you want to engage with people for 3, 4, 5 hours, if you want to have places where they can talk and be human, it's very, very difficult on a Zoom call. But yeah, the world is really changing. It's interesting, Ben, you talk about investing, because now it's all software based. So actually it's constantly being updated. You know, we run through an app on a computer, and we have a patch and we update things, you know, all the time. And, you know, to give you an example, something I thought never thought would happen. For those who are sort of roughly, I'll say my age, you know who Jazzy Jeff is, and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We had Jazzy Jeff, who's currently living in Auckland, live streaming through YouTube to 2,000 avatars for over 2 hours who were all dancing in a live music venue. Now, if you'd asked me a year and a half ago when I was selling office space, whether I thought anything like that would ever happen, I would have looked at you and thought you were absolutely bonkers. But we've done it several times now. And, you know, to give you an example, the Financial Times and The Economist have also done 2 events in our space with Jazzy Jeff as well. So the world is changing. We've just got to embrace it. Don't be scared of it, and look at it as mixing the human side with the virtual side. And remember, now everyone's talking about all these important things like reducing carbon footprints, you know, travel times. You've talked about a little bit about fear as well. A lot of people are scared to go to events, but you don't have to exclude them from a live event. So I think the world is going to change massively going forward. I mean, we've been forced into this. We probably accelerated the technology by about 5 to 10 years within a year. So it's a very, very exciting time. And don't be scared of it, because I'm not a gamer, and I didn't know that you can move your avatar around using your WASD keys. So some of you will look at me looking like that. Some of you will understand. But I use my arrow keys, and I've done okay. So yeah, come and have a look. With pleasure. We'd love to show everyone around.
Thanks, David. Ben, did you want to respond to that before I go back across to Milly?
No, I mean, that's great, isn't it? I mean, if you can get an app, I guess, David, you just run it on your own phone or your own iPad or whatever it may be.
At the moment, we're not on the phone yet, but we're on computers at the moment, computers
So
and desktops will be on
everyone
phone.
would have this app
You can
on their-
join in on the phone,
Okay.
but you can't physically join in, as it were, not quite yet. We're probably about 3 months away from that.
Okay.
But we're almost there.
I mean, really, that's where someone like a hotel, not just us, but any hotel, would benefit hugely, because you might have those 50 people that want to be together in the room, but then David says you then have another 200 people that are all there joining from their own computers from wherever they are in the world. Yeah, huge advantage. I can see it.
And I think, that's going to be the key, isn't it? I think I saw online, I have to say my daughter's a fan of TikTok. I am not, but TikTok business announcing kind of phone booths for business. And, I think we have had to get creative over the last year. And I think that events, particularly hybrid events to work, are going to have to get even more creative. I can see there's another question for David. I'm going to pick that up in a second, because I was on the avatar event. I have to say, I needed my 10-year-old daughter to help me, because she's much more proficient with avatars than I am. But anyway, it was good fun. I am going to ask one more question of Milly, and then I'm going to bring Colette into the conversation, because Colette comes at this from a different perspective. So Milly, we've spoken there a lot about kind of some of the pitfalls of hybrid events. Some of we've spoken a bit about technology, brought other people into the conversation. What do you think are the key things to try and make a hybrid event a success?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great successes of hybrid events is that huge scope that reach that you can suddenly incorporate, being able to have other people in the room like Jazzy Jeff that you would never have dreamed of, or clients that, in different jurisdictions and everything, of different levels. And so it's a real leveler, and it's a big engagement piece. I think the flip side is you don't know how engaged people are. Like with the avatar event, sometimes we could see, especially us as organisers, little bubbles that would sit above people's heads. So you'd have this little digital person with your name above it, and it would kind of change colour, or a little bubble would appear when they were offline. So they looked like they were at the conference. So you're thinking, great, we've got 80% attendance, 90% attendance. And then you start asking questions, or start asking people to move to breakout rooms, and then half the audience just sit there because they're obviously on their emails or whatever. So, the engagement piece is tricky. But the main thing, I think, for two main things with hybrid events, one is the cost, because to do them properly, they are expensive. I was actually on another call this morning, and they were speaking to a theatre director about doing hybrid performances, and he said where previously you might have had one cameraman or two cameramen to film it, you've now got to have 6 and 7. And to make these events really engaging, you do need to heavily invest in the technology if you're physically going to have the speakers on the screen. And so that's obviously tricky, but for the speakers, the big change for them is the level of engagement far in advance. So, I can't tell you how many conferences and seminars and stuff I've been involved in. Literally, I don't have enough fingers and toes, but we would have most of the speakers turn up 10 minutes beforehand, get mic'd up, test it, have a look around the room, feel familiar, go and grab themselves a coffee, and then just stand up and present. These people know their stuff. So, but you can't do that anymore. You need to have a technical rehearsal. You need to know that you can get online to the online platform. And with professional services, especially, people's firewalls, their corporate firewalls are a nightmare. So people wouldn't be engaging with connecting until the last minute. And then they're all emailing us going, I can't get on, my firewall's blocked, IT won't allow me. And it's like, we've been sending you these emails for weeks, haven't we, Bianca? I'm sure you're in the background smiling. So there is that level of engagement, but so you need to get on. You need the technical testing, microphones, videos, camera angles, lighting, all that kind of stuff. But then to do it really properly, you need a complete dry run with the AV team so that they know what those lead-in points are for the polls, for the videos, for bringing in the speakers, for these little pop-up hot topic videos that you've done. And because to make it work seamlessly, those techies behind the scenes need to know when to feed it in. So that's just so important. So it's a much longer lead time for the speakers. And, you know, all of this can be achieved, but it's just being really, really upfront with those speakers in advance and making sure that they're aware that they don't just rock up anymore.
Milly, can I also just add into that? It's interesting. So as a venue and a host, and we've done similar to this with a few bits and pieces, venues also have to make sure they've got a good bandwidth, because that's crucial to making sure this works. Now we've got a couple hundred meg coming in, but actually if you've got 50 people in the room all trying to stream it, that's going to push it to its limit.
Yeah.
Now,
and then you're asking them to do polls on their phone and stuff like that. Yeah.
So with the invent of 5G, and the more that gets pushed out, I suspect that scenario might go away a little bit and they'll jump on 5G because that's even much faster. But that's not quite there yet, and it's certainly not in our area.
And it's the lead time with things like that, isn't it, Ben? You know, like just to get BT to come out and connect that fibre to the property, to the office building, to the, they don't come tomorrow, you know. No, so months. It's
Thanks, Milly. I'm going to bring Colette in now. We will. There's lots of questions still coming through, so we'll come and pick some of those up. But the reason why I wanted to bring Colette in, and again, I'm really pleased that you were able to join today, is because Colette's obviously talking to lots of firms, you know, talking to them through 2020, seeing different people going onto furlough, coming off furlough. So I just was interested, and you know, we talk, so I have an insight, but I wanted to kind of let you share your insights in terms of what you saw over 2020, what you're starting to see now. Are certain roles, events roles in particular, given the topic today, starting perhaps to come online? Are they, you know, the profile starting to change? Are you looking for events people who've got a tech background?
Yeah, no, thanks, Claire. That's really interesting. So what we basically saw from sort of the very start of the first lockdown was obviously an instant halt on all recruitment. So overnight, our business went from 100 miles an hour, usual recruitment agency, really busy, buzzy, down to probably 95% of all of our vacancies were instantly stopped. Alongside that, we started obviously touching base with all clients, candidates who were looking. A lot of the candidates obviously put their job search on hold. Clients then started to consider the furlough option. And what we saw was that there was a really interesting mix of clients across the whole professional services sector. I would say roughly maybe 50% of them did take up the furloughing option. But not a huge amount across the business development team, in all honesty. But if they did furlough people within business development, it was the events people that went first. So we got a number of, distressing calls from event specialists who obviously got the brunt of it initially. But then interestingly, within probably about 2 months, I would say, a lot of those firms realized that actually events needed to continue. And so those candidates that were furloughed were potentially then taken back off furlough, were brought back into the helm, and were expected to get up to speed very quickly with running online events, which I think was hugely stressful for them at times. They, often very long hours. I think for some candidates we did get, we got candidates with sort of, mental health issues coming through, in terms of those that were furloughed were feeling very left out. They felt that they were losing their skill set because they weren't gaining this experience that they knew that they would probably need going forward. And then those that were still, actively working and not furloughed were expected to become experts overnight. And obviously not just experts at running an event, but also guiding those partners and advising partners. And as we all know, partners are not necessarily the easiest of stakeholders to manage. That they can be very difficult people, and they're often set in their ways. And this was the other thing that many of our candidates have talked about, is the fact that, trying to get the partners bought into actually a virtual event has been quite difficult as the months have gone by. But absolutely, in 2020, by sort of end of 2020, everybody did realise that they either embraced it or or they weren't going to do it ever. And so they have run a massive range. I'm sure many of the people on this call have run a fantastic array of events, from chocolate tasting to cocktail making and painting with canvas, you name it, they've done it. But I think as we've then gone forward, at the beginning of this year, I think a lot of people, as you've all quite rightly said, have been zoomed out. And I think the events specialists have then had to sort of rethink things. They're not running quite as many events as they were, and actually they're taking it very cautiously. And now people are literally, and this is what I've heard sort of this week, last week, as I've prepared for this this webinar, that actually they're not planning ahead very far at all. They can't do that. They have scaled it back, but that they are planning on relaunching new events, etc., from September. Many of our clients are thinking September's the date when actually, in theory, the world's going to go back to normal and people will be back in offices. As we've already said, is everybody going to be back in an office 5 days a week? They're not. Again, the consensus tends to be, with the majority of our firms, roughly a 50-50 split or a 60-40 office home. That obviously is going to pose quite a challenge for the event specialists as they try and bring people in to do face-to-face meetings. That does tend to be as well one of the key things that a lot of partners are continuing to say, that they have embraced, they have enjoyed quite a lot of the sort of the online events that the event specialists have run, but actually there is nothing like being face to face in a room with your client. So they are keen to get back, but they are going to do it cautiously, and they are certainly not going to run into big conferences that are at full capacity. I know a lot of teams are planning for the end of the year at reduced capacity. And then, yeah, do you want me to sort of talk about moving forward, my thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's got any questions for Colette, please do pop them in, because obviously Colette is, speaks to everyone all over the city and outside of it. So
Yeah.
has her ear to the ground. So if anyone's got any questions and thoughts on, what's happening, it's some interesting reflections already. So if anyone's got other questions, but yes, what do you
Fabulous.
think?
So from about January, so last year, 2020, we didn't have not one events role came across our desks, which is very unusual. From January, we've had a few, but I mean a few, a handful. All of those roles are replacement roles, either for maternity cover or like-for-like replacement as somebody's moved out. But to be honest, we've only had one of those. So actually the MAP covers tend to be the ones that we've recruited for. We haven't had any brand new positions come across our desks that are events focused. The events roles that we have worked on have 100% required online virtual experience of managing events from start to finish. And that has been a bit difficult, not for us, but for some candidates, because some of them haven't had that experience. Some of those candidates who have been furloughed for a long period of time have now got this extra hurdle. How do I get that online events experience? So for them, they've got that double-edged sword. It's very difficult for them. So that's been tough. Hybrid events, really interesting to hear what Milly was saying about those. I absolutely agree that those are going to be obviously the way forward for everybody in the world virtually in terms of events. But my only point on that one is that we haven't had any job descriptions yet requiring hybrid experience. So this is going to be something that I imagine we're going to see very much going forward, and experts in that area. Are professional services firms going to embrace hybrid events as much as other firms in other industries? That is yet to see. I somehow doubt that they will embrace it as well as some other sectors, simply because of the nature of partnerships, and that they often do tend to be a while to get up to speed and realise that actually this is probably the way forward.
It's interesting, isn't it, what you're saying there? Because again, reflecting back on some of the you know, pre-pandemic, you know, 70% hadn't done hybrid, you know, 60% hadn't done webinars, and yet now they're expecting, you know, candidates to have that experience. So, you know, really interesting. And you know, David, as we were discussing, it's changing all the time anyway. So I'm conscious of the time. I'm able to stay on a little bit after 2. I know that Ben has got to jump off because he has another call. Milly, I'm sure, can stay on, and Colette, can you stay on for a few minutes?
I can stay on, absolutely.
What I want to do is I want to quickly do the draw. So I will share my screen, and then if there's any other questions, those of you that need to drop off can drop off. Those of you who want to stay on and ask any questions, you can do. But you should hopefully see a wheel with lots of names on. Hopefully the winner's going to be online. Otherwise this is going to well, it won't fail, but it'll just be less exciting. So yes, hopefully this will work. So if I can work out how to, there we go. Who needs avatars when you've got a wheel?
I can't see my name on there, Claire.
Oh dear, it's Charlotte. So we got Charlotte online. There was only one Charlotte, so no, never mind. I have Charlotte's name, so she will hear get an email from me, and that's thanks to Ben for the afternoon tea for 2. And I should say again, before we go into the questions, that part of the idea of today was to raise money for Hospitality Action, which has been supporting the sector over what has been, I mean, it's not just been a pandemic created charity, but you know, a really important charity, particularly given the year that the sector's had. So if anyone's got any questions, if you need to drop off, feel free to do so. But if anyone's got any questions, then feel free to ask those now.
Claire, I was just going to say, you know, on the point of Hospitality Action, you know, the main thing with events, when I think of, you know, bringing events back in, is it's not just the events teams that are affected, but the knock-on effect of events into the whole of the community is huge. You know, you think of all, you know, the venues, the taxi drivers, the cleaners, you know, you go to a Christmas party, you know, especially when I was at the law firm, half of the girls would go and get their hair done, they'd buy new dresses and stuff. So the repercussions are huge. And I actually asked a great friend of mine just to do a few stats for me. She's at Book a Venue, and they, in the city, in the square mile, let me just bear with me one sec, there's over 200 restaurants, there's over 30 hotels with various facilities and meeting rooms, there's over 100 private dining rooms, there's one Masonic temple, which if you haven't been, you've got to go to Andaz and see that, there's a Victorian bathhouse, there's 20 livery halls that date back to 1272. And then there's this huge number of outdoor spaces, whether at ground level or roof terraces and everything in between. But, you know, these are just iconic places in the city, you know, that we need them to be heaving again, and we need them to be bustly and busy and stuff. So, you know, hopefully the events industry can help to bring life back to some of these really historic places. And I just want to touch on one other point that Colette mentioned, is that, you know, for those people that have been struggling to get this experience in this hybrid working environment, then there's other ways of doing it. So one of the things is that I'm on the board of City Women's Network, and we bring together women from the city, as the name suggests, and we switch from doing one event a month to 4 to 6 events virtually every month. And, you know, I run that events team, and if anyone wants to come and get some experience of doing some events, some hybrid events and stuff like that, just drop me a line, because it's doing volunteering that, you know, you can get this experience, that you can boost up your CV in ways that you might not be able to get quickly through a paid role. So go and give something back, you know, come and get back in touch with the community or your peers, or, you know, whatever it is, doesn't matter your background, you've just got to have that enthusiasm. And whether it's a city role, whether it's something in community, you know, let's just give something back and reconnect with people in lots of different ways, and using your skill set and feeling proud of doing that again, and giving people that boost of kind of reconnecting with others. So it's just an idea.
Thanks, Milly. I can see that Shelley's still online and David's still online. So we'll go back to the question, which was, and this idea of how do you get the networking both virtually and in person, which is, I think, going to be the trick to hybrid events. And the question is, if you have people at the event kind of face to face and some that aren't, do you all become an avatar, or do you have to separate off the virtual and the real? How does that work?
We don't have any bots in our world. One of the biggest frustrations of going into a world is going up and speaking to someone thinking that they're real and they're not. So we don't actually have any bots in our world at all. So there is a degree of separation. You have to do things either through a moderator, or you can project an image onto a screen of a person, a bit like Zoom. There is plans to fully integrate Zoom within 3 to 4 months as well. So you'd have a seat at the table if there were a lot of people there, 20 to 30 people. You could have people as an avatar, or people as their picture, a bit like we've got now, just sort of being there so you can sort of see around. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Shelley, if you've got, if that hasn't answered your question, feel free to. There's less of us now, so people feel free to take yourselves off mute, and also off. You know, if you want to put your cameras on, feel free. Has anyone online who's still online? We will wrap up very soon. But has anyone had any, you know, good thoughts about how to make these virtual events work?
I mean, I can talk about this all day, obviously, but we do lots of thing. You know, we have scavenger hunts, we've got QR codes that we put everywhere. But also the other thing about events, virtual events, is that when you're in a room of 6,000 avatars or 6,000 people, I can find anyone I want and I can speak to anyone I want. And that's the key thing. So, you know, I looked at, someone asked us the other day, did I want to take a booth, an event? And I think there were like 500 or 600 booths. And I thought if I did that virtually, I'd be able to contact and target people. I can direct message people. I can, you know, really sort of grab someone for a chat. So with hybrid events, it sort of opens things up a bit. It's a bit different, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. But when you have like a big technology event or something along those lines, and you're sort of wandering around aimlessly, or, you know, you get the usual guys sort of collecting pens and pencils, you can just give them a QR code, but you can actually really talk to people. A virtual event and sort of take them away to another private zone or a team suite or whatever we call them as well, private meeting room. So you can have much stronger chats. And one of the companies that we work with, or we spoke to, is a big computer company. They actually said that they now prefer doing hybrid events than just doing standalone live events, because they can speak to so many more people and engage from so many more people in different areas as well. So, you know, from anywhere in the world.
Thanks. And I think the message there, and I will try and wrap up, because I'm conscious that I know that Ben has somewhere to go, and I'm very grateful for everyone who's spent the time joining us today. I mean, I think the message for me, and I'm going to just have one kind of final takeaway message from everyone. My takeaway message is, you know, keep an open mind. Things are changing all the time. Embrace it, and make sure that you speak to the professionals, because, you know, they you know, in terms of either, you know, getting the venues COVID secure, or in terms of bringing in the right tech, will have ideas that perhaps you haven't thought of. So that's my takeaway. Milly?
My takeaway is that, you know, we used to think that lead times were short in the city when planning events, and people would give us, you know, 3 to 4 months notice. Well, now we're getting 3 to 4 weeks notice. So I think people just don't have that long-term mentality for planning too much too far in advance at the moment. So I think, you know, short and sharp is sometimes the best thing. And sometimes that means that you might only get the event 95% right because you've just under such short time frames, but that's still fine.
Thanks. So lead times. Ben, what's your message?
I think not just Ashdown Park, but any venues, whatever you need, just ask. You know, ask, and we can normally find a way. We will do what we can to assist and make things work, whether that be virtually, hybrid, or everyone in person. We will do what we can.
Fantastic, thank you, and you know, all the best for the future, and hopefully the uncertainty that we now have will to a degree lessen, so that you can get back on your feet, because as Milly said, it's a sector that, you know, it's a sector close to my heart, so you know, I want to see it get back up and thriving again. Colette, a last message from you.
I think just real positivity in terms of the recruitment market, that since January we really have, you know, picked up to not quite pre-pandemic levels, but we're so nearly there. And actually there is now a buzz about the market again. And yes, we are still all, you know, working remotely at the moment, but people are so keen to get back into the offices, to see their fellow colleagues. It's just going to be great that hopefully by September, we might be able to, you know, to carve out a really nice, you know, sort of agile hybrid way of working. And hopefully this can be mirrored on the event scene as well.
Thanks, Colette. And I'm just going to turn off the record, but thank you